Not so much instant karma, more like slow motion karma, but still funny. A couple of years ago my son moved out and bought his first house. To be close to his work, he moved to a less than prestigious part of Glasgow. The following events panned out over the course of about a year. A few months after moving in, his car was scratched halfway along one side. He was gutted as it was his first brand new car. Before long it became apparent that he wasn't alone. Other cars in the streets around him were getting scratched too. Not one or two, dozens. Some cars multiple times. He decided to put a camera up on the front of his house, and on the day I went in to help him put it up, the people next door were doing the same thing. Several other people stopped as they passed by and we all talked about the situation and tempers were running high. At first we assumed it was kids, but the locals figured out who it was. Shortly before the first cars were scratched, a new guy had moved in along the street. Turned out that he'd been moved out of his last house by the council for scratching cars. He was a bitter Glasgow Rangers supporter, and every time Rangers did not win, he went out scratching cars. I was telling my son he should go to the police, send a petition to the council or something, but he cut me off and said, "Oh no, I don't want my name anywhere near this," and I asked what he meant. As I said, it's not exactly the nicest area in Glasgow, and some of my son's neighbors are not the kind of people you want to mess with. Despite being really quiet and well-spoken, my son gets on well with these guys, and he'd overheard them talking and knew they were going to do something. What, he didn't know, but he wanted to be well clear of it. It was all kind of forgotten about, and maybe 3 or 4 months later I casually asked him if cars were still getting scratched. My son said, "No, he's been very quiet since they did his car." "What do you mean, did?" I asked. A group of the locals had gone round to his house armed with axes, hammers, etc., knocked on his door, and when he came out, they completely destroyed his car. Smashed every window, every panel, burst the tires, totaled it. Then, they held an axe up to his face and told him that if he touched one more car, he was next. Did the trick. It's now well over a year and no more cars have been scratched. My son still hasn't got the scratch on his car fixed, and the episode put up the insurance for everyone in the area, but still. Nice to see a bit of actual justice for a change. When I was doing an internship over the summer, I had to use public transit very frequently. People are usually decent, albeit a few entitled people. This story is about one of the selected few. So it was 6:50 a.m., and I was waiting for the bus to arrive. I was already sweating, and the sun barely showed itself yet. People around me were quite anxious on this Monday, call it Monday syndrome, whatever. Basically, nobody was in a great mood. After a couple of minutes under the sun, we saw the bus a couple hundred meters away. At that point, as an unspoken rule, people started forming a line based on how far away from the curb they were currently standing, like they always used to. So I join and we have this line made, and the line gets tighter as the bus comes closer, with people coming in closer from the back to get on quicker. Then comes the entitled woman. I'll call her Karen. She was in her mid to late 20s, dark purple sunglasses on, browsing the phone the whole time we were standing up. The bus stop only had seats for 3 people, and she was sitting in one when I arrived. Naturally, she was quite a ways back from the start of the line when it was assembled. So, what does she decide to do? She cuts the line like it's none of her business. Now, in the UK, you might get some rude stares, but not here. In Turkey, people tend to speak out about these kind of events, with the hope of publicly shaming the offender. So a man in his 50s turns to her and very calmly says, "If you don't get back to where you are not getting on this bus." Karen, who is now enraged at this man's behavior, starts raising her voice, rough translation, "Hello? I was sitting back there, how dare you take my spot? Move along please," as she tries to squeeze in between the opening by the man and the door. "Thank you." The man lets her pass and have her way, because I imagine he is already frustrated because it's Monday, and it's quite hot. Well, she gets on, and that's when karma strikes. She doesn't have enough money on her card. The screen flashes red, and after seeing that we enter the bus one by one, beep beep green light, and we sit down. She goes around and asks nearby people for a swipe in exchange for money. She finally finds someone who agrees and she swipes. This time, she is the one red with embarrassment, and to top it all off, all the seats were taken by the time she scanned the card, so she is forced to stand up the entire way. I saw karma affect a person in about 10 minutes. One Saturday morning in the late 80s, my then fiancé, now husband, and I stopped to eat breakfast at a McDonald's in downtown Los Angeles. We had planned to spend the day shopping for bargains in LA's famous fashion district. While waiting in line to place our order, I suddenly became aware of a young woman in the line next to me swearing to her friend in an agitated, perturbed manner. As I listened, I was startled to hear that I was the subject of her disgust, or rather my purse was. You see, I was wearing a Gucci purse over my right shoulder and the woman was telling her friend that it wasn't real, that I should be ashamed to wear such a fake-assed purse, that she was a connoisseur of designer purses and owned many, along with several other invectives attacking my character and social status for carrying such an insulting object. Since she wasn't speaking to me directly and appeared to be quite upset by me and my purse, I decided to ignore her rather than show her proof that my handbag was indeed an authentic Gucci. It had been purchased for me by my cousin, a fashion design student, at the House of Gucci while visiting Italy on a European field trip with her classmates earlier that year. I had given her money for the purse and she brought it back for me. I had never owned a designer purse before, but because the US currency exchange was high at the time, I wagered I might luck out and be able to afford such a souvenir from Italy. I later saw the same purse for sale at Nordstrom in the South Bay here in Southern California, so I was able to verify that it wasn't a knockoff. I really wanted to explain to the woman the details of how, why, where and when my purse was acquired, but I reasoned that a person who would denigrate a stranger because of the handbag she was wearing probably wasn't too rational, and therefore wouldn't appreciate my educating her on what a real, Gucci purse actually looked like. Even though I wasn't really an expert. Subsequently, the woman's next move confirmed I was standing next to a narcissist, for when she got to the counter to order she leaned forward and extended her left arm out about a foot from me. I realized she was showing me the 4 or 5 rings on her hand which each contained small diamonds. By then I was bemused by her performance. She didn't know me but was communicating her belief that she was of a higher social standing than I. After that, I turned towards my fiancé and snuggled next to him as he placed our food order, not telling him about the bizarre attack I had just undergone. Here's where karma visited. After collecting our food, we stayed inside and sat at a table next to a window with my back to the window. About 5 minutes later, while talking and eating, we were interrupted by the sound of a car's engines starting and stopping multiple times. I turned around to witness those same 2 females from the line now seated in a very old, dilapidated, oxidized, small gray car in the parking lot that the woman who had hated on me and my purse was trying to start. When she saw me turn to look at her, she placed her right hand over her face and looked down in embarrassment, all the while continuing to try to start her car without success. At that moment, what did I do? How did I react to that scene? I turned around, smiled and resumed conversing with my fiancé. I realized that I didn't need to gloat at the woman's plight and was glad I hadn't personally responded to her attacks against me.